morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. So, who won Comic-Con on Thursday? Well, it wasn't a very exciting competition, I'm afraid, but still, it did result in a tie between Paramount and Sony, with DreamWorks Animation barely placing in third. And they're only in third because those are the only three movie studios that presented anything yesterday. Nobody really seems to have wanted to go first. And I think these studios made a good case for not going first because they didn't really do anything with their allotted time. You would think with how slow yesterday was, they would take advantage of this, but alas, they did not. So let's go through each presentation, the highlights, and why I think they didn't really make the most of the opportunity they had here. So I'm going to give a slight edge to Paramount because Christopher Nolan showed up. Yes, both Matthew McConaughey and Christopher Nolan showed up to promote Interstellar at the end of the panel. And apparently, they showed a new trailer to the audience, but that trailer won't be released to the public for a little bit of time still. I think that's a mistake. I think on the one hand it's nice to do something for those the people who are sitting in Hall H and worked very hard to get there. It's hard to get into Hall H. But I think to have nothing to release to the general public is, I think, short-sighted and really, takes the wind out of any publicity you would get out of presenting at Comic-Con. I think those Christopher Nolan, like just right here, you can see this Christopher Nolan Matthew McConaughey picture, aren't going to last beyond the 24 news cycle, especially when Fox presents later today and knocks all of this like non-news off the slate. So they showed this trailer, which apparently, from what I'm hearing, doesn't show too much new additional material because they just gave the same setup. And then even if they didn't want to release the trailer, I would have released some kind of new stills, maybe something with Anne Hathaway, who's really an unknown commodity here. She has one quick shot in the trailer we've gotten so far. Well, I guess there was a teaser and then a full trailer, but still, I think there's a lot left to discover about this movie. And I guess one could argue that Nolan's playing it close to the vest, which is how he played this panel. They talked a little bit, and he didn't really divulge anything that was a spoiler or anything that was even an update. But he did say one thing that I thought was interesting. He said that the character Cooper that Matthew McConaughey is playing really wants to be an explorer, and that's a childhood dream, and Nolan says that was a dream of his. And then the opportunity presents itself, but to do so, he has to leave his family. And I guess, as you can see from that first trailer, the argument is, well, to save your family, you must leave it. However, I don't know, that just seems like such an impossible choice to me. And I guess I don't like the way Nolan set it up. Like, to chase his dream, he has to leave his family. Well, I think as a lot of parents and people who have family members would tell you, the cost of a family, a good, strong family, is sometimes your dreams. Or if you have a good family, they want you to achieve your dreams and they'll come with you. I'd be like, do you have any extra seats on this spacecraft? Because my 2 kids are coming along. That's what I would have insisted, and I'd be like, to hell with safety protocol. Isn't this like post-apocalyptic Earth, where we have no resources and it's like the Great Depression times like a gabillion? My kids are coming. So, but we'll see. We'll see how the film goes, and I think a lot of Oscar buzz. I did a video, as you might recall, about Interstellar potentially being an Oscar contender and being intentionally manufactured that way by Nolan. Well, I think I'm starting to hear the word Oscar mentioned in a lot of other sources. So, success! The campaign is beginning, and he didn't even have to start it. It's kind of getting like a little bit of a grassroots campaign. You never want to have to call yourself out for an Oscar. It's nice for somebody else to mention it for you. So the Paramount panel, what else did they talk about? Because that was at the end. They also did a lot of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle talk to really drum that up about 2 weeks out before the film opens. You can see that Megan Fox and Will Arnett showed up. They talked a little bit about Tony Shalhoub and Johnny Knoxville joining the voice cast late in the game. As you know from my trailer reviews, I think that looks very good, but we'll see if it performs. This has been a summer of underperforming movies. And then, of course, The Rock stopped by. I'll have my Hercules reviews up later today, and he was like, go see my movie. I always get confused as to why some of these films open during Comic-Con when your fan base is going to be otherwise occupied. But Lucy's supposed to do very well, but I think that's because it has more of a crossover appeal because of its artistic aspects. Hercules, I don't know if this was the best weekend to release it, but The Rock, as you might have heard, bought out a couple of theaters in downtown San Diego, some movie theaters, so that fans could go and see it on him. I thought that was very nice. But you have to hand it to The Rock. He works hard to promote his movies, even when he's not effective. I guess at some point you have to say some kind of the help is help we don't need, or no help at all. I forget the old saying. All right, so anyway, that's Paramount's panel. So that's why, because of the Nolan show up, I think Nolan is kind of Comic-Con royalty at this point, like a little mini Stan Lee, who didn't come because he has a problem with his voice, so he just canceled his appearance totally. I don't know. I've met Stan Lee back when I was working with Marvel's YouTube channel. He's a sweetheart. I can't say anything bad about Stan Lee. All right, so that's the first panel. That's our winners. And then very close behind was Sony. And the reason I say Sony was close is because they did release stills for the public. You'll notice out of that Paramount panel, there was no release for the general public. Absolutely nothing, which is why I think you're not seeing a lot of headlines generated from that panel. Sony got the headlines because they gave people something to run with. And that was primarily Goosebumps. Goosebumps was the film they really pushed, and it's starring Jack Black, and he showed up, and he was giving people camera ops everywhere because not only was he there, but they had a bunch of extras made up in costume from the film to pose with him. And of course, nobody hams it up quite like Jack Black, especially when he has props such as these. So they talked about the film where he plays R.L. Stine, the author of the Goosebumps original series, and apparently this movie creates a world where, this is an exaggerated version of R.L. Stine. He's not really this weird or creepy, obviously, but I think it's great of R.L. Stine to be so game to go along with this. But this movie imagines a world where R.L. Stine's characters are real, and he keeps them locked up in his house until some kid comes by and accidentally releases them. Hollywood scriptwriting 101. But so you can see here a bunch of stills they released from the film, including this one of Slappy, the creepy ventriloquist dummy who is a villain from the books, who they're really going to be playing up here. Ventriloquist dummies are quite creepy, and of course they used very effectively in Saw. And also people are already comparing him to Chucky. I think he maybe drew Chucky comparisons before, but anyway, because it was a slow news day, a title like Goosebumps could get a lot of coverage. So I think kudos to Sony for doing that. They also, another big movie I think that people are excited about is Chappie coming from them, the new Neil Blomkamp movie. It has Hugh Jackman, Sigourney Weaver, Dev Patel. It's this futuristic situation. It's almost like AI though, Steven Spielberg's artificial intelligence, where a robot is adopted by a family of criminals, actually, an unconventional family, and how he's how he's raised. By the way, on a side note, if you're not watching Extant on CBS, it's kind of good. At first I was like, this is incredibly lame and stupid, but it sucked me into its vortex, and now I'm very curious as to what's going to happen to Halle Berry, her ridiculously forgiving husband, and her robot son. Alright, so anyway, back to the Sony panel. So they just have this poster of Chappie, as you can see. But it is very derivative of extant artificial intelligence, AI. I just feel that this idea of a robot, and is he human, is he not, has been explored quite a bit. And of course, Neil Blomkamp's signature visual style, especially with robotics, you can see easily on display here. He's kind of apocalyptic South African whole situation. I don't know. I wonder how long he can go with this before he needs to change it up at least a little bit. Neil Blomkamp, you gotta add a couple new things, because then we just kind of feel we're watching the same movie over and over again. But the other thing they pushed very hard was Pixels, even though Pixels apparently has just begun shooting and they really had nothing to show. Chris Columbus apparently came over video chat to say, hey everybody, or a canned message. I think Chris Columbus, you have to respect him, the Home Alone director. And then, of course, Harry Potter, he got that franchise off the ground. You might argue about the quality of, the job that he did doing that, but he still made it happen. And, of course, Home Alone. And he also Mrs. Doubtfire. They're making that. I watched that again, by the way, recently. It really holds up. If you're looking for something to watch one night, watch Mrs. Doubtfire. And then I got on a Robin Williams kick and also watched Good Morning Vietnam. And I had a good time. Robin Williams used to get some really good scripts. So anyway, Pixels, what did they show? They had Chris Columbus, then they've turned the Hard Rock Hotel. Sony takes over the Hard Rock Hotel every Comic-Con. Last year they decked it out in a lot of Amazing Spider-Man stuff, and this year they have Equalizer picks, some other stuff, a lot of stuff for Fury. Not a big exciting slate for Sony right now. And then also this Pixels stuff. So here's the logo for Pixels, as you can see. The actors weren't there. If you haven't seen this picture, this was already released before Comic-Con of the actors in costume, and Michelle Monaghan is your typical Sandler female lead. I mean, you can spot one a mile away at this point. And then also, of course, Josh Gad is in there post-Frozen, trying to capitalize off that. He has gotten so much out of Frozen. And then also Peter Dinklage in a comedic role. He's done comedy before. He's a very talented actor. I'm excited to see what he does with this. And interestingly, Sony utilized him to promote the arcade and also an experience. If you're in San Diego, you can go to this arcade and I believe get a chance to be in the movie because it's just started filming. I put a link below in the video description to this clip with Peter Dinklage so you can kind of get an idea for his character, but just barely. It's not even really worth watching, but I know I wouldn't take my word for it. I would want to watch it, and then I would go be disappointed. So feel free to go do that. All right, so DreamWorks Animation coming in last. And I think that's because they didn't have a lot of new material, really any new material to show. There were a couple of reveals about Penguins of Madagascar, including a clip, which I'll also put a link down below in the video description if you'd like to check that out. So let's discuss what Paramount Animation did talk about at their panel. Craig Ferguson hosted because he's a voice in Penguins of Madagascar, and then they had some star power with Benedict Cumberbatch and John Malkovich. Although, just to underline how poorly DreamWorks Animation is doing, most of the people watching the panel asked them only about other properties outside of DreamWorks Animation. And in fact, I believe one question was even, what comic book character would you like to play if you had the opportunity? Really underscoring the fact that neither one was playing a comic book character at the moment. And I would really implore anyone at a convention to think before they ask those questions, not only because, you don't want to hurt any actors' feelings and put them on the spot because, they can't really campaign for a role unless they're Sean Young, I guess, wanting to be Catwoman. But also you're going to get a non-answer, as was given here. Benedict Cumberbatch, maybe this person wanted him to say Doctor Strange, but Cumberbatch elegantly sidestepped it, of course, and saying Batman. And then John Malkovich was classic John Malkovich and said Lois Lane. I thought that was fabulous. I actually would like to see that, even briefly. As I recall back in the day in Lois Lane's comics, she had a lot of out-of-body experiences, so why not have her being John Malkovich? Penguins of Madagascar, as one of you pointed out, though, quite excitedly, I believe it was Skybright1, he said Warner Herzog is going to be in Penguins of Madagascar in a small cameo, but apparently a crucial one. There was some speculation that it could end up maybe being cut from the film, so I don't know how crucial it could really be, but I think that DreamWorks Animation, why would they lose such a voice talent and apparently a visual reference as well? I think Warner Herzog is playing or voicing animated Warner Herzog. Why lose that? Especially when I think this film needs all the things that can get to distinguish it from the animated television series. Because when you watch this clip, despite some excellent voice work from Cumberbatch and I think particularly John Malkovich, this just seems kind of like an episode of Penguins of Madagascar. It doesn't seem like a movie. I would also say it reminds me a lot of Megamind. It just makes me wish they would make Megamind too, because maybe they could advertise it better this time. DreamWorks Animation really needed to make more of a splash, I feel, at this panel. They're having a hard time, as you know, at the box office with How to Train Your Dragon 2 underperforming. I know someone always writes down the numbers and says, look at this big number. And I will tell you, the film is underperforming. And it's not performing at the level DreamWorks Animation expected or needs it to perform at. Franchises are supposed to build. And as you might recall, Monsters vs. Aliens made quite a bit of money, but again, didn't make enough to warrant being a franchise. So How to Train Your Dragon 3, kind of scary right now. What a bad week for animation when you consider the news about Legend of Korra yesterday. So anyway, that's what they talked about with Penguins of Madagascar. So I'd be curious to know what you guys think of that clip, and if you think this is enough, if you think DreamWorks is doing enough to get people excited. And the other film they talked about was Home. That's the film with Jim Parsons, and actually the one that switched release dates with Penguins of Madagascar. So this amped up TV show, which, I really liked the first trailer for Penguins of Madagascar, but now that I see the clip, I just feel it looks very TV still, unfortunately. But I think both these films actually look good. As you might recall from my trailer reviews, I think Penguins of Madagascar and Home both look excellent, actually. But we've seen done that, and also by switching their release dates, I think it shows that DreamWorks Animation itself has such low confidence in the properties, particularly in Home. So just Jim Parsons showed up to promote that. I'm really surprised that Steve Martin wasn't there, especially since his style of humor seems to be so ingrained in the property. Although with maybe this delay, maybe it's taken out a little bit, and maybe that's why he's not there. So maybe that's something to think about. But really, because there's nothing going on in this panel, we have to kind of look beyond the panel for something of interest. And I really feel they made a mistake of not introducing something from BOO, Bureau of Otherworldly Operations, which is one of their other big movies next year. It would have given something new, so maybe some character designs. Maybe have fly Seth Rogen down there. He's certainly super hot right now in between Neighbors and The Interview, just to get a little more attention to this panel and what DreamWorks Animation is working on. But maybe it's not ready. I think they're becoming a little gun-shy because of their problems at the box office and therefore also on Wall Street. But I'm a big Jeffrey Katzenberg fan. I think he's a fantastic businessman. I say it all the time. Watch Waking Sleeping Beauty, about how he helped turn the entire Disney animation department around, even if they're loath to admit it. I think he was just as important to the Disney Renaissance as Howard Ashman, and I think he's a brilliant businessman and he really knows his animation. Unfortunately, he just doesn't know how to advertise a movie. And they created a panel with nothing really to talk about at Comic-Con. And it was a slow news day at Comic-Con. Okay, so on to the viewer question, which I think is very interesting today. They're always interesting, but I think this one fits beautifully with Comic-Con. This is from Owen Dean. And Owen had two questions, but I like the second one the best, so that's the one I'm going with. And Owen asks, do you think that a villain movie without any heroes would work? You can already see that Sinister Six will have Spider-Man in it. I discussed that yesterday on Morning Movie News, as you might recall, because they delayed Amazing Spider-Man 3 till 2018. I think it makes sense that Andrew Garfield will return for Sinister Six, because how can you bench him for 4 years? So Owen continues saying, but do you think that a movie like Suicide Squad would work, or maybe a Riddler movie? Well, Owen, we can see who your favorite villains are, but I think it's a great question, because we're hearing so many movies being announced. DC and Warner Brothers are expected to announce an entire slate, and so is Marvel because of all the dates they just reserved with untitled projects over at Disney. So on Saturday we should be getting announcements for multiple films, but they're all going to probably focus around heroes. So I think this is great. I'm going to join Owen. I'll answer it in a moment myself, but I'm going to join Owen in asking all of you, what villain would you like to see get their own movie, and would you see a villain film? Now, of course, as we've discussed with a potential Sinister Six film, it's hard to root for immoral heroes unless you turn them into anti-heroes, and that's always a slippery slope as well. Look what happened with Maleficent. It made a ton of money, that's what happened, but people were also upset that they kind of de-villainized that iconic, some say the most iconic Disney villain. But I think that someone who's already been made into an anti-hero is Loki. And I think he would be an awesome, awesome character to get his own movie. He has his own comic, which is very good, and all of its different incarnations. They keep changing him. He's a little boy, now he's a goth teen, and it's still always fun to read, though. But I think Loki would be great because he could further explore Asgard, which is its own, whole obvious universe with the 9 realms. Well, Midgard is 1, so he's got a whole other 8 to talk about. But then also you could bring other characters like Enchantress. And I think Thor, with all due respect, I think that the Thor movies are really only interesting because of Loki's involvement, and he's really become the co-star of those films. So why not just make a pure Loki movie? I think Tom Hiddleston was what brought in a lot of people to see Thor: The Dark World. Just take a look at all the GIFs and memes that came out of that film. And so I think that a Loki film, to me at least, is a no-brainer. And if I were Marvel Studios, I would definitely put it on my slate. And if Jesse Eisenberg is good enough, maybe a Lex Luthor movie? I don't know. My dream was always to write a Lex Luthor and Lois Lane team-up book. I thought that would be fun, kind of a, romancing the stone, Indiana Jones kind of, like a corporate adventure. Because, corporate espionage can be pretty tough as well. So I thought that would be fun. But anyway, as I said, I'm asking all of you what you think, and I'd be very interested to know because we kind of have an idea of what hero movies we're going to get. So let's entertain ourselves with the idea of what villain movies we'd like to see. All right, so that's today's Morning Movie News. Thank you for tuning in. Please stay tuned for the rest of the day for Hercules reviews, trailer reviews, and of course more Comic-Con news. All right, thanks for watching.